Hello, everybody. Welcome to Picks or Players, a Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast with some betting stuff as well. My name is Chris Lewis, and I'm just going to be talking about my trades for this week, like we do in every episode, and then also go over some buys and sells after that. But yeah, we only got a couple trades that happened this past week, but they're pretty big, so but yeah, let's just get right into it. Um, so in a super flex, I believe it is a start. Yeah, start 10. Yeah, it's start 10. Start 10 super flex league. With a tight end premium, a 1 point tight end premium, but there's no tight ends in this trade, so that doesn't really matter. But I gave up a 2025 first, a 2026 second, and Brandon Ayuk for Kyron Williams, DeAndre Swift, and Tony Pollard. And in this deal, I really wanted to bolster my running back room. And I still have my own first. This was someone else's first that I traded away. I really wanted to bolster my running back room because my team has been very solid so far this season, and I like where it's at. With Brandon Ayuk kind of out for the year, I viewed him as expendable in this deal, especially because his value has kind of dropped dramatically. And um, originally, he wanted a 2025 first and a 2026 first, but I think he valued Brandon Ayuk as more valuable than the first round pick, which was interesting to me because I don't even really know if Ayuk is going to be able to bounce back a lot of his value from before. He definitely could, but we'll see. It's still a question mark. I mean, I do like the idea of buying Brandon Ayuk right now, but overall, like I like a lot of what these running backs are doing. They've been pretty good for scoring this season. Um, so yeah, I mean, it just felt like a good deal for me. Obviously, in the offseason, I may feel differently, but I still think Kyron Williams is a very solid dynasty asset. He has a lot of value, I think, moving forward. I mean, I don't think the Blake Corum thing is really an issue anymore. He's clearly been a very productive running back again this season. Um, and Swift had a rough start to the season, but he's really bounced back. And Pollard's been very consistent, and he's tied down to Tennessee for a while. I feel like these guys have shown that they are um, good enough to be startable for fantasy, um, even if their age and kind of dynasty past is a little questionable. Um, but I feel like this is a good trade overall, and I'm happy with it. And then the second trade is in a one quarterback league with no tight end premium, and I gave up Sam Laporta, a 25 second that's projected early, another 25 second that's more mid to late, uh, and then another mid to late third and a late third, to get my own first back, um, Bucky Irvin, Dallas Goddard, Calvin Ridley, and the fourth round pick. Now, this was a deal where it's like Laporta had really not been doing very much for me this year. So for the rest of the season, I really don't view the downgrade from Laporta to Goddard to be that massive at all. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. But for Dynasty, obviously, Laporta still has a lot of value moving forward. He's tied to a great offense. And just who knows what's going to happen there. He could definitely regain a lot of the value that he established in his rookie season. Um, but I just wanted to have the flexibility of having my pick back, and then I also felt like the guys that I was getting with Bucky Irving and Calvin Ridley were going to help establish some of the depth on my roster for the rest of the season. I had a lot. I like a lot of the receivers on this team, but they haven't really been as good as they have been previously. And I think Bucky Irving is a solid prospect. Um, he was not really a guy I was massively high on going into this season, but I think he will gain a lot of value being a young running back and tied to this Bucks offense for a while. Um, there's not really a ton of risk with him, especially since they already have Rashad White as well. Seems like they like both of those guys, and I expect them to continue to be a big focal point of that offense. And then, yeah, I don't really mind moving on with those picks. I think a first is much more liquid in terms of getting a high tier player. So I'll just take that opportunity when I can. And the person who I was trading with needed more picks in general. But yeah, those were the two trades. I'm pretty happy with them both. Big ones, but things. I think both of them helped out my teams pretty well. Especially kind of moving forward. But kind of let's go into some buys and sells real quick, and then we'll end the podcast for this week. I got Chuba Hubbard as one player that I think that I'd like to recommend to sell right now. Chuba, I feel like he is a guy that has just been excellent this season, and going into the year, he was definitely a buy for me. But this is probably his all-time peak in terms of value. Yeah, it definitely is. He's running back 22 right now on Keep Trade Cut. And this isn't more of like a fade towards Chuba. I mean, if you can't get decent value for him, then I wouldn't panic sell him at all. But potentially you could get something like 2 seconds or something just for Chuba Hubbard, and I don't think that's a bad deal at all. Even if you were able to get something like a 2025 late first, I mean, that's something that I feel like is very doable. You could maybe somebody whose pick is going to be late in 2026, you could maybe get that and just bank on their team being not very good next year. A 2027 first, maybe you could get. I mean, I would do all of those deals, sending away Chuba. That's just a lot of draft capital and liquidity to be able to obtain for a player that you used to buy him for like a third. So I just think that's a good opportunity to kind of just sell high and just reap the profits in the long run for a player that I do like. But if you can get that kind of deal for him, I would do it. And then another player that I would look at trying to sell is George Pickens. And George Pickens has been very good recently with Russell Wilson as the starter. But, I kind of feel like if you could get a mid-first plus for Pickens, or even an early 2025 first for him, that's a deal I would do every day. But if you can get something in addition with a 2025 first, I think that's a really good deal. Not because I dislike George Pickens. He was another player I thought was a buy going into this season, just because he was just so undervalued amongst the other running backs in the league. No one was really as high on him as some of the other young backs. And it just felt like that, ever since the end of last year with how bad Pickett was and kind of how the season ended for the Pittsburgh Steelers with him doing a lot better with Mason Rudolph. I don't think people were really sold on him as a long-term player. But I do think he's a very good player, and especially can have a lot of upside for fantasy given his deep ball type acumen. But I would also say, though, that the Steelers are very likely to add talent at receiver this offseason. They've been basically in every trade rumor for a elite wide receiver. They definitely view it as a need. They want to bolster the depth of that room. So although Pickens is wide receiver 13 right now on Keep Trade Cut, I definitely would look for an opportunity to move him and get some decent return on investment for him before the Steelers get another wide receiver in that offense. Moving on to the buys. Real quickly, I just want to reiterate that, kind of going off of last week and talking about the trade that I did there with Malik Nabers. Even though Bijan Robinson gained a lot of value after I made that deal. So it's like there is a little bit of regret there on my end for making that trade. If maybe I gave up way too much to be able to do that. Um, so it wasn't really as much of a buy low as I thought it was. Um, but I still think it's a good opportunity to buy low on Malik Neighbors. He's still a long term great dynasty piece. And just because of the New York Giants quarterback situation, I feel like he's lost a lot of value. But this is a player that I feel like you can really build an offense around. And it's a great time to go and get him because people are really souring on the future prospects of him just because of, Daniel Jones and just whatever they do at quarterback moving forward. Um, and this week they have Tommy DeVito starting, but yeah, we'll see. I still think Malik Neighbors is a guy that I would buy low right now. I mean, even it's not really a buy low, but I would buy him just because I think he's really going to jump back in value in the off season, or by the end of the season maybe. Um, Another player, that I was thinking about was Caleb Williams, and he is a guy that has just been really frustrating this season. Um, I really like him as a prospect, and I loved his college career because of how explosive he was with his legs and throwing the ball deep down the field. But that really hasn't translated to the NFL level, especially because of Shane Waldron, who is now thankfully gone from the Chicago Bears. Um, but I still think Caleb Williams has a lot of upside, and I think right now is a great opportunity to buy low on him because I think he will work out his issues, and the Bears have a lot of talent around him. It's only a matter of time until they figure it out, whether it's next season or as this season goes on. I would expect a new coaching staff for next year, but I think with what they've shown against the Packers, there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about Caleb moving forward. They dumbed down the offense a little bit, and he was able to move it around, use play action, roll out. They were running the ball a lot more. I think that is what Caleb's strengths are. And just kind of simplifying it and not making him do too much was a really smart thing. And, I think that's going to be a good strategy moving forward. So I expect him to play a lot better towards the end of this season. And then my final buy I would like to recommend is Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin is a guy that has just been phenomenal this year. And even though he has a bad injury right now, I still would believe in him bouncing back for next year. I mean, he had some amazing statistics in terms of EPA per play with Baker Mayfield. So, I mean, I think that just shows that they have an amazing chemistry and that Chris Godwin is explosive. And maybe that some of that explosiveness is gone moving forward. But, I mean, for what he's priced at right now, if you can buy low and get him for like a second or a second and a fourth, I mean, I'm definitely doing that. I mean, there's so much potential to be gained next season if you can just kind of buy low on him now. Just because I think people, are kind of sick of injured older wide receivers, and they don't want to have to deal with that issue moving forward. They rather have the liquidity. But I still think that Godwin is going to be productive moving forward for fantasy, so I would take a chance on him. But yeah, outside of that, that's pretty much all I got this week. Kind of a quicker podcast than we've had in the past few weeks, but thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed.